So you've been on a lot of podcasts. I've done a lot of interviewing myself, and I realize that I'm putting you on the spot, but I want to ask, if we created the best episode that you point people to and you say, go listen to this episode of Just Keep Learning that I was on, and it delivers on helping people become founders in this creator economy, what are the things that you think we should put at the front of the episode to really help them the most?
Yeah, absolutely. First off, Justin, thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it. The thing that's really important in my mind is a mindset. And the mindset encompasses a lot of different things. So for example, I think your surrounding environment is probably the most important thing, I would say. And subconsciously, people don't even think about it, right? They just go about their day. Oh, this is my life. And they just go about their day-to-day activities, not really thinking about like who they're interacting with, right? What kind of thoughts are going through their mind when they talk to these people, right? When they're scrolling through feeds, I mean, like, what are you watching that's like going inside your brain, right? Like these things are really important. For me, like I moved from New York to San Francisco, bought a one-way ticket, and I lived on the floor of of a high school friend for 3 months. I was living on the floor on an air mattress. My back was killing me. It was real rough, and I did that because when I was in New York, so I was in finance. I was literally working on Wall Street. Graduated from college in 2009 during the Great Recession. So terrible time. But I realized that I wanted to surround myself with people that I wanted to be with in the future, right? So like where do I see myself in the future, and how can I surround myself in that place? And so when I did that exercise, like I was like, all right, so New York, I'm in finance, but there weren't a lot of like communities for startups, right? And so I knew I had to get myself out there to San Francisco so that I could start the life that I always wanted to live. And that ultimately is starting my own company. So that was the goal when I first left New York City, is to start my own company. But I wanted to do it in San Francisco because the environment is so entrepreneurial. It's like, for example, on the East Coast, I feel like a lot of people they don't necessarily judge you, but they prefer you to work at a company that's like reputable, right? A top, Big Four accounting firm or an investment bank. Like they value that tremendously. But here in San Francisco, you start a coffee shop down the street and people are like, oh, that's so cool. Like, can I go try your coffee? Like, it's a different environment. And I feel like that is so like understated and people don't realize how much of an effect that is, because it's like your brain, your subconscious is like constantly gathering information around the environment and like normalizing what's okay and what's not okay. And like, unfortunately, humans, we want to fit in. It's like a weird thing, but we want to be accepted by others. And so like when your environment is telling you that it's not okay to do certain things, but that's exactly what you want to do, then you got to move and you got to go to a different place. And so that's exactly what I did. I left in 2011, October. And so, going back even to New York, I was starting these side gigs. So I had I was writing for a personal finance blog for $25 an hour. And it took me like 3 hours to write one article, which I think you could probably make more at McDonald's than, doing what I was doing. But it gave me a taste of the self-reliance that I feel like is so important. Is like, you don't want to rely on someone else to give you a paycheck every 2 weeks to survive. And I feel like most people live like that and they feel like it's okay. Like, okay, well, every 2 weeks I'm going to get this paycheck and I'm going to pay my rent. But in reality, like, if you think about it, like that's such a bottleneck for your freedom and like for, just for whatever you want to do. It's such a stress point. Like if they cut you off, like if they terminate you, then you're screwed, right? And so I wanted to build my own kind of side income. And so that's why I started writing for this personal finance blog. $25 is an article. I would not recommend anyone take that job for $25 an article. But I did that. And then I, started developing, this is 2009. So this is around the time when iPhone apps were blowing up. And so I was trying different iPhone app development. And, I made the classic mistake of outsourcing the most critical component of the product, which is engineering. Like, I'm building an engineering product, and I was looking for all these development shops. And back then it was like a wild, wild west. It was really hard to find a good one, a reputable one. I found one in Ukraine, and the developer actually like went off to a vacation in Thailand for like a couple weeks, and I couldn't even like reach him. And it was a terrible experience because I was literally paying him on retainer, right? And like, if it's just so frustrating to have a project that you're paying for, and you don't have control over that. Like the developer has all the power. You have no leverage. And so, to be honest, that contributed to this decision that I needed to move to San Francisco to network with other engineers in San Francisco so that I could start my own company. And so that was kind of like my thinking was like, wow, like, first of all, there are no engineers in New York City, or very few. The mindset of people here are like, they're happy with these jobs. They go to work, they after work, they go to happy hour, they, party on weekends. They spend a ton of money because they're making a lot of money at banks and law firms. But then they're unhappy during the rest of the week during, when they're working. And so that was not the life that I wanted to live. So I bought my one-way ticket, San Francisco, and then that really changed the trajectory of my growth of my career. And so I think that's kind of the number one takeaway that we can kind of structure this episode around is the mindset and how that impacts your decision making.
At times we see the iceberg, we see the top of the mountain, and we don't see all of the things that happened to build the foundation of someone who's successful. You are successful now many times over, but I really appreciate you sharing those early stories, because that's the stuff that people do need to hear to make them realize that they're not alone when they're on that island struggling to figure out these first things. They might even have to kill their first few darlings as well. Maybe they start a podcast and it doesn't work. Maybe they start an e-commerce company and it doesn't work, and they think that there's something wrong with them, and they return to that sort of 9 to 5 or something that maybe deep down they know they don't want to do. So I really just first off want to give you a pat on the back and say how much I appreciate you sharing those early stories, because it really does have a big impact. One of the things that's so tough to bottle, let's say, and if we could bottle it and sell it, we'd be billionaires, but is the initial mindset or learnings that you came across that allowed you to then think like that. And what I mean is, were there podcasts you were listening to, resources like books, or did you have mentors in your personal life, or even heroes online or in the movies? Like, what gave you some of that fuel, do you feel, that led to being able to make some of those decisions?
So this is a great question. Living in New York, I didn't have access to these meetups. Actually, you know what? I did go to a couple meetups, and there's like 2 people that showed up. And so community was too small. So what I did was I started watching and listening to podcasts, and I became obsessed. Like, literally in the subway rides, my lunch breaks, at night when I'm, eating dinner by myself in my apartment. Like, I was just consuming everything. And so, I mean, it was a process. And I essentially, I feel like I got like a second degree, like almost like an MBA, just consuming. I was probably consuming like at least like 5 hours worth of content a day. I was doing my 9 to 5, but then anytime outside of that, I was literally listening to something like a podcast. So I don't know how, honestly, like, we're looking back at it now, like, I was like pretty crazy, like crazy obsessed, I would say. And now, like, it's even better. Like, there's so many opportunities to meet people and, with all these social platforms, you can talk to, connect with all these people. There's never been a better opportunity right now than, starting a company. Like right now is the easiest it's ever been to learn from someone that's, already accomplished and essentially like get mentored by them. And I feel like it's more about, at this point, it's more about execution and just doing it rather than access. Because before it was access, like people couldn't get in the doors. But now that's all been democratized. Anyone can get in the door and talk to anybody. It's just a matter of like, all right, how do I reach this person at this company and like, how do I actually execute, the game plan? Like that's really what it is now, is execution rather than access or actual lack of information, because the information is out there. You can Google anything, you can watch any YouTube video, it's all out there. But it's a matter of like actually like sitting down, learning it, and then applying that and building your own life, right? From scratch and carrying out that plan. So yeah.
I feel like it's one and the same, but when it comes to business and social media, at least in terms of the companies that you have, whether it's the EDC brand or it's your own, creator supporting and accelerating newsletter, podcast, or it's your Instagram puppy brand, like in all these areas, social media and business do kind of go hand in hand. So maybe we can kind of lump them together and just say, if somebody were to be trying to create systems that allow them to succeed in those areas, when it may seem like, you said, the barrier to entry is so low, so it may seem like it's saturated. What do you think about when it comes to helping people who are worried that it's saturated, and what should that sort of game plan, like you said, be?
Yeah. So the challenges are always there, right? So back in the day, it was about, okay, how do I get this amount of money to start my first business? Like it cost a lot of money to start a business because the infrastructure and the support wasn't there to start a business. And so it just cost a lot of money, and you probably had to like raise a ton of money to start a really basic company. But now that's all gone. Like, we got no code tools, AI. I mean, AI, you can get so far with just using AI alone. So that's all gone. And so what's happened now is the challenge is no longer about how do I find the money, to start a company. The challenge now is, all right, so all these tools are out there and everyone has access to these tools. All right, now what? Right? Okay. So anyone can build anything now. So what's the challenge? Okay, the challenge is actually like standing out, like executing on a project and like essentially standing out from all the other tools that are going to be built. And so you see that already with like ChatGPT. Like there's so many different wrappers that are literally just taking ChatGPT's technology, just putting a front end to it, being like, hey, this is, whatever, like AI tool wrapper, like chat AI. And then there's like bot AI. Like there's so many of these tools now. That's just essentially ChatGPT with a different interface. And so you're already seeing it where, you're getting a proliferation of so many different tools. And so really the challenge, in my opinion now, is about distribution. And how do you stand out? How do you get, how you build an audience where you're going to be able to distribute your product, because your audience is going to theoretically trust you, right? More than, a company that has no reputation. And so in my opinion, the biggest thing moving forward, the challenge is going to be about trust. And so how do you earn that trust with each of your customers? And you earn that trust by building consistently that trust over time at scale, by building your audience. So I think that's kind of where this is moving towards is when you have basically an infinite amount of tools that can be built because they're so easy to build now, like who's going to be able to stand out? And I do feel like, it's about distribution that's going to win now. So
And that ability to help people with personal branding. I'm a big fan of your newsletter. And you have, again, it's so fun talking with people like yourself, but it can be challenging in another respect. And that's that, as you know, you have kind of different pillars of the ways that you've been able to be a successful entrepreneur. But to kind of stick with that creator economy idea, like first class founders and that sort of area, you just mentioned personal branding. I'm a big fan of the stuff that you write and produce there. One of the most valuable things that you talk about when it comes to personal branding is the ability to network. And so if we were to talk about this idea at as simple of a level as we can to help somebody who's maybe nervous and doesn't know where to get started, what are some key pointers we can give people when it comes to networking in this economy?
Yeah. So, we mentioned that it's easier than ever to connect with people. The barriers have been broken down. Connections are democratized now. Anyone can reach anybody. Like, I get random DMs I get probably 100 DMs a day. And it's from anywhere. Like, anyone can DM me. And to be fair, I do read those DMs. I read all my DMs, right? But there's a lot of noise. 99% of it is noise. And so how you get, like, for example, like how you would get my attention is, a creator has things that they're pushing, right? And so, for example, like I have my newsletter and my podcast, First Class Founders. Like, if you DM me saying, hey, I listened to your last 3 episodes you did with so-and-so guest, like, those are amazing. Like, how long does it take you to make those videos? Or whatever it is, just like show interest that you actually did your homework and consume some of the content that I produce. Because it doesn't, Justin, like, podcasting, it takes a lot of time. It's a labor of love for a long time before you see any type of ROI, right? So, that it takes a long time to make these episodes. And so if someone DMs me and says something like, hey, I really enjoyed your episode, like, I'm going to respond. I'm going to say, thank you so much. Like, that means a lot to me, right? It's just as simple as just listening to an episode and telling me you listened to it is going to get you way further than, it's so funny, Justin. I got DMs from podcast production companies, and they're like, hey, we can make short form videos out of your podcast or long form video on YouTube. Like, are you interested? And I'd be like, all right, well, have you listened to my podcast? Because the way that I do my podcast episode is pretty unique. Like, it's not a traditional, question and answer type podcast. It's, it's almost like an audio documentary, because I work with the producer on developing this like storyline of this, this show essentially. And I asked them, hey, have you listened to any episodes? And they'd be like, no, I haven't. And it's like, then why are you DMing me in the first place, offering this service? You've never listened to it. And I'm like, because they're like, okay, we can do this for $500 a month. And I'm like, I guarantee you, if you listen to my episode, you will not say that you can do it for $500 a month. Like, I challenge you to do it for $500 a month. Like, that's my response. And then that's it. Like, that's the DM. And then they never come back, right? So it's like, do some homework, and like, every creator, what they want, which is just, it's just easy. Like, listen to a podcast episode, or if they have a newsletter, just hit reply on their newsletter and say, hey, I love this newsletter. I love how you make these X, Y, and Z points. Like, don't just say like, love your newsletter, and that's it. You got to like show effort. Like, oh, I love how you talk about this. I'm trying to apply it to my own business, blah, blah, blah. And then like that, you build a relationship. And then if you do more and more of that, like, they're going to be like, wow, like, this person is like so invested in my content. They love my content. So like, yeah, I'll talk to you, like it's like a trade-off of like, a value essentially. And your value when you start out, when you don't have much to offer, is, I guess, engagement with the content. And then ultimately like, ultimately, if they have an offer, like a low ticket, let's say there's like they have a book or something, right? Like a $10 book. Like if you can afford $10 and buy their book, like that's such a low commitment, but they'll be so thankful and they will talk, like they'll talk to you. And so like, it surprises me how many people just send these cold DMs and they're like, hey, you want to get on a 30-minute call. And I'm like, why do you want to get on a 30-minute call with me? Can you like expand? And then like at that point, they usually don't have an answer, and they're like, oh, it's just I want to, let's connect. And like, there's no that, like, I don't need to. It's gonna sound weird, but I don't need to connect with that person. Like, I don't have any interest, right? So clearly, the value is one-sided, where it's like they want to connect somehow with me, and yeah, and so it's just really about like finding that value exchange that works, and yeah.
Well, you're an incredibly busy person, and for me, I stopped taking those types of meetings too. Those are probably the DMs that I don't reply to be honest. I mean, I would if I was in passing, but to an extent, we have to manage one of our most important resources in time. And I remember ending up at coffee shops and sitting down in front of someone, and then realizing really that there was no purpose to meeting up with them. I still to this day in some of those cases don't know exactly what they were after. I feel like there was some kind of ulterior motive that they were even still too scared to ask. I don't know what happened, but you'll get those exact things. Can I pick your brain for X many minutes or whatever? Like, and I feel what's kind of unfortunate is that it's almost like people will pass judgment that we're not humble enough, or we don't have the humility, or these kinds of things. And we can't take that to heart because they don't yet have an understanding of what it's like to be managing our minutes a little more diligently like this. And a lot of times that might even be the habit that led to success. As a side note, I appreciate you feeling that there was enough value to do this today. For me, I get a lot of inbound now. So there's tons of podcast episodes, pretty big guests, I suppose, as people might say, authors and people with big personal brands and social followings and businesses, etc., that I don't have to do as much outreach, but I still do when I come across a great creator, such as yourself and some of the others. I feel like teaching that mini course to people or doing a live stream to help people would bring a lot of value, because it always surprises me how much they struggle. And I came by that pretty naturally. Like when you mentioned the idea of replying to someone's newsletter, I would genuinely do that because I just was replying to their newsletter. All of a sudden, 6 months later, you're with this person on a podcast episode, and it's someone like Brendan Kane, who's been a New York Times bestseller twice over, and something like that. And looking back, I suppose those were the reasons that happened. It's kind of like relationship advice of playing hard to get or not actually feeling desperate. And then all of a sudden you have these relationships. I feel like that underlies, as I said, a lot of the businesses that you do, obviously the creator one. But one of the things we don't talk a lot about recently on this show is direct to consumer, e-commerce, Shopify. I feel like if we were to pick one of the business pillars right now, that a lot of people might be sitting at home with an idea of a Shopify store that they could build. I'd love to hear about how you came up with the idea of that business model. And I guess just explaining what the business does.
Right now, as you mentioned, I do have 4 businesses. 2 of them are e-commerce shops. And I'll get into each one in a bit, but I just kind of want to explain the different businesses. So 2 are e-commerce brands. One is a 3PL, which helps other e-commerce brands. And so those are my 3 businesses for quite a while. And then I launched the creator business, essentially. I'm kind of lumping everything that I do in the creator world into one business, but I'm kind of experimenting with it. Like I have sponsorships, for example, in the newsletter. Like I wouldn't consider that like a separate business. I just lump that in with like all the other stuff I'm doing. So essentially 4 businesses. And so the 2 e-commerce businesses, well, actually, you know what? Let's go back to 2015 when I launched my first business, Urban EDC. And so this business is an interesting business because how I started it was just looking at my credit card statements. And so it's kind of funny, but people ask me like, what business should I start all the time? And what I tell them is like, okay, so you got two resources that you can look at. One is your time. So like when you don't have to work, you're just hanging out at home or whatever, your free time. Like, what do you like doing? How are you spending your time without you like feeling like you're working, right? So that's the first barometer. Second barometer is credit card statement. So you're looking at things like, what am I buying on a regular basis? That's obviously not like groceries or utilities and things like that, but like, things like your hobbies. Like, what are you spending your money on? And so when I looked at this, I determined that like this category of little, I guess, pocket tools like pry bars, bottle openers, and like desktop toys like spinning tops and fidget stuff. Like that was something that I was just constantly just buying, like without even thinking about, because I thought it was really cool. Like, titanium machine pens, the knurling on it. It's just a really interesting thing for me. And so I decided to double down on it. And this is right around the time when Amazon FBA was kind of dying and Shopify was on the rise. So like, people were trying to build a brand outside of Amazon. And so instead of going on Amazon, I decided to just go right into Shopify and building a brand. And so, yeah, that's kind of how it first started. And I should tell you, like, the way that I validated the store was I actually bought stuff off of Amazon and resold them for no profit. It was just to see it, just a test to see if there was a demand for a boutique everyday carry store. And yeah, there was. And so I, kept going. Every week we have a weekly gear drop. And so Wednesday at 12 p.m. Pacific is when all the new stuff comes into the shop. And so it creates this nice cadence where it's like it's like a feedback loop. Okay, what did well last week? What didn't do so well? Okay, let's double down on things that are working. And so it's like a heartbeat of, what we do. And so that's kind of how the first business started. The second business is called Spotted by Humphrey. It's a dog boutique. And that started very organically because, my wife and I brought home a French Bulldog in 2017, and his Instagram just blew up. This is right around the time when Instagram videos were starting to get really popular. And so we had a few videos that got up to like millions of views. And so when that happened, like, obviously Humphrey is our French Bulldog. His following just blew up, and people were asking like, hey, where can I buy that harness? Where can I buy that leash? So we decided, hey, instead of like just linking them out to like Amazon affiliates, like why not just make a shop ourselves? Because we already have the infrastructure. Like we already have one e-commerce shop. We can just spin off another site using Shopify and just do the same thing. And so that's how the second company was born. It's just essentially, the front end is all the same. Urban EDC, front end, website, same. We actually use the same theme for the second one, Spotted by Humphrey. Same theme, different colors and all that. It's audiences are very different, but back end is all the same. And so we decided, hey, let's just pool our resources together and just have two e-commerce stores. And so that's how that began. And then a couple years later, fulfillment and logistics is really challenging for e-commerce brands. So we decided to bring everything in-house. And so we decided to ship everything ourselves. And then we actually had brands coming to us being like, hey, who's doing your fulfillment? Because like my fulfillment is such a pain. And so we actually had paying clients for GrowthJet, which is our 3PL business, before we even had a name or a website. So we launched with no name and no website. And we had paying clients. And so that's when we knew we got something here. Let's roll with it. And so decided to launch GrowthJet, which is a climate neutral certified third-party logistics company. And we just moved into a 39,000 square foot warehouse, and it's just rolling now. And so those are kind of the three different e-commerce related businesses. And they're same but different in different ways. But yeah, they've all been a great learning experience.
Was Spotted by Humphrey something that you had crafted by design? I know in terms of the story you referenced, it was once videos blew up, but not everybody brings a dog home and creates an Instagram feed for them. So was that at least in part something that you were thinking of growing Humphrey's brand?
We did not anticipate that he would become a celebrity. No, it was totally random. But then once we saw that there was traction and momentum, then yeah, we spent more time. We try to create more videos and like, we try to engineer more viral videos and things like that. But when we're just when we're bringing him home, we weren't planning like, okay, let's make this little dude a star, right? Like we were not planning on that at all. It's just very opportunistic. And so, yeah, I mean, one core theme of like what I've done in my life, in my career so far is like, you want to see the opportunities and like when they come, you want to maximize that opportunity. And so like a lot of, I read somewhere like, I think either Jeff Bezos or someone that basically said like, you want to maximize your ROI, return on investment, on your luck. And like that's what differentiates really successful people versus like, just, average folks, because luck is something that's really difficult to predict. But when it happens, then you really cash in, and that's when you see your huge jumps. And so it's really important to like be cognizant of like what's happening around you. Like for example, during COVID, like March 2020, we got kicked out of our space. But instead of being fearful and being like, oh my God, like we got to shut down our business, we went aggressive. We said, oh my God, this is an opportunity of a lifetime. We got to lock in a long-term lease because the lease, no one knows what's going to happen with the world. So we got a lease that's like super cheap. And our business boomed in 2020 because we were doing logistics, and one of the companies is like wellness drinks. And so we were like shipping. I was actually in there. Like I actually had like forearm problems because I was shipping so many of these beverages. But we were like just rolling. 2020 was very profitable for us because we were just, e-commerce is crushing it. And so, when these challenges come up, I always see the other side of the coin, which is like there's opportunity. And so that's also going back to this mindset thing that we're talking about, Justin, which is like, everything is two-sided. Like, okay, there's a crisis. Okay, well, what good can come out of this crisis? And so there's always like, a good side to a crisis, and obviously there's bad sides to a crisis. But like, for me, I always try to figure out how can we take advantage of this change that's happening so that we can come out of it ahead. And so I think that's a really important lesson there too.
Kind of the Instagram growth and Humphrey's celebrity, as you put it, was somewhat by accident, but then you tripled down on it.
Mm-hmm.
But the EDC brand, Everyday Carry, again, for people who are new to that, Urban EDC Supply, that has a pretty big social following. You now have a pretty big social following on social media. So even if some of that happened by accident, then looking back now, what are some of the things that you think somebody else starting a Shopify store and building out their own social channels as distribution, as you put it, being one of the most important things? What are some tips for people when it comes to distribution?
Yeah, so there's like micro things and macro things, and I'll touch on both of them. So let's start with macro. So when you look at a macro landscape of the social platforms, right? The events are things like Elon taking over X or Twitter and then renaming it to X. Like that's a macro event that's going to have major ramifications on how the platform is going to evolve. And so when you have these macro events, and another one could be like TikTok. TikTok didn't exist, like 7, 8 years ago. And it was called Musical.ly, I think, back then too, when you were just doing music videos and just, yeah. So, but it's changed, and now it's like a huge platform. And so macro is like, what are the big trends that are happening? Like, what is Elon going to push next? Like, is he going to try to push video? Is he going to try to push podcasts? Like, I've heard that he's trying to push podcasts, right? So if that happens, then Justin, you and I are in a great position. Like, we already have podcasts. We're just going to be putting it out there. And so, like, I guess tying this to the other example that we said is like, okay, if Elon pushes podcasts and all of a sudden podcasts, like these long form videos or whatever, like get a boost, like we want to maximize that opportunity. And so like, I'm going to double down. I'm going to work really hard to like ride that wave. Right. And that's exactly what we did with also Instagram. When the videos are starting to take off, like we posted so many videos, like, we were just video after video after video, and some of them would just pop, go into the millions. And so like, we kind of have to know like these macro change events on these social platforms and ride that wave. Right. And so that's the first thing. Now, micro is things that you can actually control. So like macro is less controllable. Like, you can't force Elon to push podcasts, right? But you can. The micro level is, things like just every day doing a little bit, right? And so I do really think that it's with repetition, you just always improve. And like, I know because I was a terrible, like if you listen to my first few episodes of First Class Founders, my podcast, like I sound terrible. Like I have no energy. I sound like I'm reading an audiobook. I sound like this where I'm just like talking like just a monotone voice. And I just sounded like you could basically fall asleep to it. I should have basically narrated a story for people to fall asleep to.
Sell your podcast to the Com app.
Exactly. But now it's like way more energetic. It's better. Like, when I was first doing podcast interviews too, like I was less energetic like this. I was more like the monotone. And like the feedback I got was like, hey dude, you got to pick up your energy. And so like, yeah, I took that feedback and now I'm like way more energetic. And like, it's a different ballgame. So repetition is definitely something that you want to put into your day-to-day habits, whatever you're working towards, right? So if you want to become a better video creator, then like, then practice, create a video every single week or every single day for a full year. And like, that's what you got to do. And like, put in that effort. And so like, for me, I'm doubling down on X. And so I write every single day, some kind of long form thing. And I post it every single day. And like, that just helps me get better. But also it keeps me kind of like in tune with what my audience likes. And so if you think about it, building an audience is the same thing as building a company. Your product is your content and your audience is their customers, right? And so when you think about it that way, it's like, all right, I'm going to continuously improve. I'm going to put something out there, see what happens. If it sucks, whatever. No one saw it. Not a big deal. Just continuously improve. And so these are the micro, I guess, things that you can control. I think Warren Buffett calls this inner scorecard versus outer scorecard, where the outer scorecard are things that are like, things you can't control, but they just happen. And so you might get a tweet or a post that goes viral. You can't control that, really. That's the outer scorecard. Inner scorecard is like, all right, how many posts did you post today? How many posts are you posting tomorrow? Like, these are things that you can control. And that's how you can kind of manufacture your own success and your luck by just putting in the reps every single day. And so, going back to your question, pay attention to the macro changes that are happening because you can really ride the wave of one of these big changes. And that's why I'm paying really close attention to what Elon's doing because he's going to be making a lot of changes and like, we'll see what he does. But like, I'm excited. Like I want to like ride whatever he changes he's doing. And then micro is like, I'm writing every day because I don't know what those changes are going to be, but I want to make sure that I'm ready for it when that happens. And so it's kind of like this dichotomy, this like marriage of like micro and macro that you got to like kind of do both at the same time, right? So
I love it. I appreciate the X/Twitter/Elon thing because for me, it's interesting. One of my big dreams would be to be a little bit more of a traditional YouTuber, like the Casey Neistat style. Speaking of New York City and where something does make sense, going to New York City and making videos. But for now, I need to make sure that the foundation of business and having the machines running to afford me some free time to just make creative videos, that makes sense and fits into my habits. And as you mentioned earlier, how our habits match to the success. But with Twitter, I posted a video there just to see what would happen, and it got 7K views. I haven't posted a YouTube video in my life that got more than 70 views in the first day. So that was something that really kind of piqued my interest a little bit. I haven't doubled down on it yet because it requires making more videos like that. And again, it's just not a priority yet. But when it comes to a little bit more of the in the weeds tactical type stuff, since we're talking about it, how do you feel like with Twitter, for example, a lot of people get lost with quality versus quantity. How do you tackle that question yourself?
Yeah. So when you're first, posting for the first few times or few weeks, I would definitely err on the side of quantity. And the reason why I say that is because too many people place an emphasis on planning and what people think of you, especially at the beginning. So like, when you're getting yourself out there for the first time, you're really fearful about what others will think of you. Like that's just a human nature thing. But the more you post, the more you'll realize that no one actually cares. Like no one cares. And so it's really about repetition in the beginning. And so I would definitely do as many reps in the beginning. And so quantity is first in my book. And then through quantity, your quality will get better. And so after a certain point, yeah, maybe you do a little bit more thinking about, okay, now I've done a lot of these. Like, how can I improve? Like, what is the process? Like, what can I do to like, get more engagement or whatever it is, right? That's going to be step 2, which is like quality. And so that process is probably the most, I guess, time consuming, but like you want to make sure that you're you get in the habit of producing a lot of content or just repetition, and then you work on your quality, but don't lose that consistency, because the last thing you want is like, you don't want to lose it, because then you have to start back at step 1 again, right? Which is like produce a lot of content. But then step 2, producing a lot of like work on your quality. And then the step 3 is like both quantity and quality, which is really hard, right? I mean, that's what we all strive for, but it's hard to reach that. But if you do enough, I mean, if you look at like, let's use a basketball example, right? Like professional basketball players, like how do they have like, some of these guys have 90% free throw rates? Like how do you do that? Like you just continuously just do it over and over again. And then you also try different things. Maybe some form isn't working, so you try a different form. Like, so it's this process of like, first thing is like repetition, get in the habit of continuously trying. Second thing is like, okay, quality. Okay, let's make this better. How can we learn? Third thing is both quality and quantity, because at that level, you're essentially like playing in the big leagues where you're like, you can do both, and you should be doing both at that stage, right? And that's when you're going to see this compounding growth.
We've established a few times in this episode that you do a lot of things. And when you're answering these questions, it's quite evident that you have a ton of experience, but also that you're juggling a lot, because if you're putting basketball free throw development like time into writing on X and also building 4 businesses, you're juggling a lot. That's quite clear. I think it's been established. How do you feel about the topic of burnout, or being able to have empathy for the listener who's like more overwhelmed by hearing all of the stuff that you do, as opposed to motivated at this point?
So this question is really, it's hard for me to answer, because I don't think there is such thing as burnout. Let me take that back. There is burnout, but the only way you burn out is if you're not seeing wins from what you're doing, unexpected wins. So what I mean by that is, let's say you're posting on X/Twitter for a full year, and you start with, let's say, like, I don't know, 0 followers. You post for a full year and you get to like 10 followers after 1 year. Like, that is very discouraging. And so at that point, you would feel burnout, in my opinion, because you're trying so hard and you're not getting anywhere, right? And in my book, that is the only definition of burnout. The definition of burnout, where you're constantly working a lot, like you're working, morning, night, whatever, like you're getting 6 hours of sleep, but you're like crushing it. Like you are setting new records. You're getting all these opportunities. Like, I don't know if you'd be like, oh, I wish I could work a little less because I'm seeing so much success, but I need a little bit of time to relax and get away from it. Like that doesn't happen at least from my experience. And so like when things are happening for me and when there's momentum, like I can't stop working. Like that's the bottom line. Maybe I'm just built differently. Like I think maybe I'm just a weird person that loves business, but for me, I never get burnt out because I'm seeing these wins, and yeah, I mean I think it's really important to structure your day so that it works for you, so you're not getting like call after call, and then like so you're getting pulled in 1,000 different directions. And actually, I just recently hired an executive assistant, which has been really a game changer for me. And so she handles my inbox, she handles all my scheduling, and she actually helps out with a lot of my newsletter and back-end podcast stuff as well. And so that has opened me up to more stuff, right? So I think that if you feel like you're getting pulled in different directions, then I wouldn't call that burnout. I would just say that you need to think about your time and evaluate your time, how you're spending it, and then maybe hire some people to do those lower value tasks, right? But I wouldn't consider that burnout. I would say that's more of a mechanism of you realizing what the next steps are to grow. And so that's how I see burnout. Justin, I don't know if that answers your question or not, but yeah.
I think it really does. One of the ways that I love to approach this show is the idea of open-ended, more opinion-based questions, and that maybe the person I asked that a few months ago might have answered it differently, and the person next year might answer it differently as well. But there's not going to be really a wrong answer per se. I think we earn value from each answer regardless. And that's not just a political babble like BS. It's true, depending on what the question is. Obviously, sometimes there are right and wrong answers. And I can really relate because I mentioned a little bit about my intrinsic desire, my creative artist side, wanting to produce better and more YouTube videos. And that's a perfect example. I feel like in the YouTube world, people pour, 80 hours into making a video that gets one view over the course of a year. And then they make 40 of those. And it's like, how do you stick with that? You must friggin' truly love it, or you're going to burn out. And so I certainly appreciate what you were saying about not seeing the momentum build and the success and being able to kind of have the green lights, I guess, as Matthew McConaughey puts it. It's something that I feel like happens a lot on this show, but as I'm doing a little bit of reflecting on this episode, we're going to be wrapping soon. I feel like there are so many things that you bring value to the creator economy in, whether it's storytelling. We could dive into a little more beyond your executive assistant of how you structure your day, as you put it. We could talk about so many different topics when it comes to helping people with business, but naturally we'll run out of time. And I think in maybe a year from now, it'd be fun to have you and I both listen back to this episode, poll the audience, maybe even both audiences, and create kind of a follow-up question type round 2. Before we do, though, I always ask a series of theme questions, and I'll rattle those 3 themed questions off. But just before I jump into those, I wanted to ask, this is always a fun topic too, and I feel like you're the type of person, because you said you eat, sleep, and breathe business. If you had ideas for yourself or somebody else about another business, if you went to add business 5, what would it be?
So I do think that the world of entrepreneurship is changing now. From, people are seeing the VC path as not only basically 10 years ago, people thought, oh, you got to do the startup world, to exit and make your millions or whatever. But I do think that there's this new path happening, which is, I call it a personal holding company. And I don't know if you saw any of that content that I've been posting, but basically it's the concept of having a portfolio that you manage yourself. So this is not, you're not raising investor money to get the highest, ROI on the portfolio. This is for yourself. And so this concept is essentially, you have a set of businesses where you're not operating them. So like I have CEOs and general managers across all my businesses. And so you're not managing them, but then you're obviously tracking it to make sure that it's doing well. And so you're kind of managing the portfolio of businesses that serve you yourself. And so the biggest difference between a regular holding company and a personal holding company is that a regular holding company is like, you raise a round of funding, or, you have investors, and like you're looking to buy companies that are, really doing well financially. And so in that scenario, like theoretically, a holding company can go out and buy like a scaffolding company because it has high margins. Like every time they go out and like build up the scaffolding to do painting on a building, whatever, like it's a huge margin business. But I have no interest in that scaffolding business myself. And so what I've done is I have my hobbies, my Urban EDC, my pocket knife business, my Spotted by Humphrey, which is a dog boutique, GrowthJet, turning a cost center into a profit center, and now this creator thing. Like those are all centered around me. Like I am interested in all those. And like I work on the dog business with my wife. So we get to travel. It's all tax deductible because we're doing a lot of these campaigns. We're staying at a 5-star hotel in Sonoma in a couple weeks, and that's all paid for. Like we're just going there to create content. So like it's so fun for me, right? And so like it's about this idea of like building different parts of your life, or like building businesses around your hobbies to serve you, the entrepreneur. And I feel like this idea is really new, and I'm actually trying to like promote more of this idea because I just realized I've been living this personal holdco life for the last 8 years, and now like all these entrepreneurs that even like big time entrepreneurs that they want to build a PhD, and like all of a sudden I'm like an expert in it because I've been doing it for 8 years. And so I think for your listeners, if you can, I would kind of ride this wave of like this idea of a PhD, a personal holding company, because I do think that this is kind of like the next wave of entrepreneurship. And so I don't really know tactically like what business would come out of that, but just the infrastructure for PhDs does not exist right now. And so like that will be a good opportunity in my eyes.
That's awesome. I have seen the content and I'm following it, and I look forward to seeing more and more of it because I feel like I'm still early on in my journey. I'm a lot closer probably to my listeners than I am to you in terms of the different things that are kind of rolling along. I can't go hire a few CEOs right now, but I have so many ideas that I feel like I'll be in a similar position. So that's why I'm definitely paying attention. Before we do the themed questions, you know everything that we talked about so far in this episode. You know the value that you bring. Is there anything that you'd feel like if we wrapped right now, you'd be leaving out, or any last second thoughts that you had on these topics?
If you asked me this question, the question prior, I think I would be talking about the personal holdco. But because we just talked about it, I think we're all good.
Boom, mic drop moment. All right, so the first theme question is just something that you yourself are learning right now may or may not be off-brand.
Well, my wife and I are expecting our first child next year, so I am learning how to become a parent. So that's been it's been a lot of it's been fun, but also very intimidating and challenging. But yeah.
Well, congratulations. That's the main thing that I'd love to say there. And in a year from now, if you're looking for your first co-founded business beyond the Spotted by Humphrey with your wife, then let me know, because parenting is a topic, a category that I've never really tackled. But I mean, I'm so interested in that topic too. And I think like, it's just, what better value can we bring to the world than being good parents?
Right.
So congratulations.
Thank you.
One piece of advice, speaking of this is great timing to have that announcement, because the second question is, if you were to leave one piece of advice for the next generation, what would it be?
I would say to question everything that you learn and that that society tells you, even for me. So, if my child later on comes to me and says, Dad, I don't agree with what you're saying. Like, that's great. You know what I mean? Like, okay, that's great. Like, prove me wrong. Like, I would love to see it. But I think that each one of us brings a, gift to this world. And it's about the viewpoint that you create yourself, and then telling people about it and creating a movement around that. Like, we need more people like that versus people who are just listening and following in the footsteps of others. Like, I just feel like we need more movement creators and leaders that that the first thing that I would say is just question everything. Like, no one has this figured out. Like, everyone is trying to figure it out as we go. And like, when I realized that, like, it unlocked a lot of doors. Like, I don't see people in authority as like, oh, they're the ones that know everything. Like, I just feel like, there's just so much opportunity to do everything better, as a human race. And so, like, question everything that you learn and kind of see and listen to.
It's perfect. The final one is, you take the microphone. I know you're a fellow podcaster. If you were to ask me a question, what's something that comes to mind?
I would love to know, what's your purpose for what you're doing with your work, like this podcast, what message or why is it that you do what you do?
As you said earlier, it's a labor of love and it's a lot of work. And I think it's even more work than people realize when you're doing podcasting the right way. So I'm so damn thankful that I have a big why, or else I don't know that I'd be able to keep going. And that why for me is that I felt like I really didn't belong in like traditional education and the traditional 9 to 5 world of work. Very much like intrinsically didn't really feel like I belonged, to the point of like panic attacks and stuff. Like, it just wasn't built for me. But I had kind of coping mechanisms and cheat codes, and whatever I did, I could get by. In fact, I could get by like with good grades and stuff. And when I went into education, I did my master's in education, I was learning from people like John Taylor Gatto and Sir Ken Robinson and Randy Posh about modern learning, head fake learning, and how we have to get rid of the school system from the Industrial Revolution and, John Taylor Gatto's book's called The Weapons of Mass Instruction. Like, it's beautiful. How can we stop teaching the way we're teaching, or else too many kids are not going to be able to succeed because they're creatives, because they're entrepreneurs. And most of that was surface level, but then I met youth in jails, mental health hospitals, teen moms, and youth with addictions. And I was like, holy shit, every one of them is super creative. And they would make an incredible podcaster. They would build an unreal blog or a dog Instagram channel, but they don't know how. And I don't know how either. When it comes to all these different mediums, I can't know them all. And so I have to go seek the experts, because the skill set and competitive advantage I have is maybe networking and learning how to produce something like this. And then I can at least share it with people to help them learn. And the other thing for me, if I go to, it's very similar to what you said earlier on about yourself, why I do entrepreneurship in general is because I have that dream lining of being able to help my own kids. They're only 5 and 10 right now, but in 10 years from now, they can really benefit if I know these skills firsthand, instead of having to say to them, I don't know, look it up. So that's why I'm trying to also learn entrepreneurship firsthand, to bring it full circle, to be a better mentor to my kids.
Amazing, man. I love that. I feel like it's so important to know why you do certain things, and I feel like that's like one of the best answers I've heard. So it's awesome.
Well, that means a lot. Somewhere that I can definitely continue to learn from you is the how, because I've had that middle piece of the golden circle for me has existed from day one. It's nothing I've really had to develop. I've probably gotten better at articulating it, but it's never even budged a tiny bit. It's the reason why I started the show in the first place, and then what the show has looked like so far and how we've reached success with it is what continues to evolve. But yeah, I appreciate that. It means a lot. And the last thing is, if people want to go support your work, the classic question, where and maybe why do they go?
So I'm pretty active on X/Twitter at Yong Soo Chung. That's YONGSOOCHUNG. And also my podcast is it's rolling. So it's First Class Founders. So you can find that on Apple, Spotify, wherever. Or you could just go to firstclassfounders.com. And you'll find all the episodes there, all the transcripts and everything. So yeah, check me out on your podcast player. Put a lot of work into each episode. So yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say that the quality and design elements across every single one of your brands, including the newsletter and podcast, are first class. And maybe that's something we can dive into, like I said, in another 12 months from now or something, because I think everybody should check it out. You mentioned you're active on X, but you're also one of the best writers and brand builders that I follow right now. So
wow.
Definitely people should check it out. Appreciate you taking the time to do this today.
Thanks, Justin. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And scene.
All right.